Guys, thanks for joining us for what is my very first PRCA Americas Café conversation. My name's David Gallagher, and I am a past chairman, I guess that was my title, of the PRCA, and a current fellow of the PRCA. But tonight, it's my honor and privilege to host about 60 minutes of conversation with three wonderful people. I'm fortunate to consider them all colleagues at one point in our collective histories, but certainly to consider them all friends right now. And I'm sorry, I've done a terrible job managing my space, and I've got two different dogs and a cat walking around right now, so I apologize for any background noise. For those of you that don't know, just a little bit of background before I introduce our guests about the PRCA. It's literally the world's largest collection of PR consultants, agencies, and advisors around the world, with more than 60 years of history. Originally based in London here, where I'm located, but spreading around the world to create a real global community of kind of like-minded, forward-facing, bright professionals at all levels of their career. And this chat, this America's Cafe chat, by its title, as it would imply, is focused usually on those practicing in North, Central, or South America. But as you'll see from some of our fellow participants, it actually has a global community attached to it. And it's just one of dozens, if not hundreds, of events that are put on virtually and increasingly in person by PRCA, just to bring us together and share some experience and have some conversations about different issues, different opportunities, different developments related to the practice of public relations and communications. But importantly, to meet people and maybe be inspired by their stories. And that's why I was so happy and so grateful for the participation of these three good friends. I say three, but we're also assisted by our executive producer, Michael Collins, sitting in California, the Australian from the PRCA in LA, who will be monitoring the chat feature. And hopefully you'll start asking some questions there, and we'll come on to them and answer them live in a moment. So what I thought I would do is just quickly tell you why I wanted these three people to be on this call, and why I thought you might benefit from hearing their perspectives. And then I'll just start asking them, each of them, a few questions, and then maybe it'll turn into a more open, freewheeling conversation. But if not, I'll keep peppering them with ever intrusive questions until they get so uncomfortable that we turn it over to Michael for a live intervention. And I'll start with center of my screen, Ashley, now at Spotify. I start with you because we've known each other the longest. And I think I reminded you, as I looked back on our social media history, we actually started corresponding with each other on Twitter back in 2007 or 2008, I think, which is crazy to me that so much time has passed. You were at Ketchum in the US, I was at Ketchum in the UK. I don't think we even knew that until we were several tweets into the conversation. We really shared more of a common interest in a political candidate at the time, which also seems like a very long time ago. And then we discovered that we had some other interest, professional as well. And then we became friends in real life. And I'll ask you in a moment to tell a little bit about the first part of your journey. But I wanted you to be on this call because you've worked for some great agencies, Ketchum, where I just mentioned, but also Weber Shandwick. And then you moved in-house. You worked for some amazing organizations there. Every time I've seen you, usually in New York, but I think we've managed to meet up in a few other places, you were being courted by somebody else. And so you've had to go through this decision of, is where I'm at good enough for now, or can I pursue something bigger and maybe more in keeping, with my ambitions and my purpose later? So I think you've gone through this now at least half a dozen times since I've known you. So I just was very grateful for your willingness to share your perspective. The person I've known the least amount of time, but interacted with most recently, is Patty. We've only known each other for a few years, I guess, and I think our connection was directly through Ketchum and through you winning the Young Can Lions competition 4 years ago, was it? I'll let you come on to that in a moment. And I say that we spoke recently because we actually had a really good conversation yesterday, kind of partly preparing for this and partly discussing the merits of Soho House membership. But I think we spent time on an equal amount of time on both. And we really got kind of deep, kind of fast in terms of how do you shape your career around your sense of personal purpose, and how do you shape it around business purpose more generally? And then how do you align with an organization's purpose? And hopefully you find some sort of sweet spot in between or among those three circles. So again, if we're able to get past our resumes and get a little more philosophical, we can get into that. But I know you've had some thoughts of your own. You've made the jump from agency to in-house to management consultancy, which I think a lot of us really look up to in terms of their discipline and thinking and their use of data and how they approach things. So you can give us an insider view on that. So I'm grateful for your participation as well. And then finally, Sean, I've known you somewhere in between the length of time I've known Ashley and Patty, but you and I have actually worked together in the same office in London. We faced clients together. We've gone to pitches together. You made the transition from agency to a great assignment in-house with Netflix, and then came back to agencies. And you've also made the switch, the successful switch, which I'd say isn't necessarily all that often, from the US to the UK and then back to the US again. So I know you've got some great perspectives as well. And you and I have also discussed the benefits. This is a weird theme with me, the benefits of Soho House membership. I do have some other things I can talk about, but for some reason, you and I have had that conversation as well. We can maybe wrap on that. But what I thought I would do is just ask each of you a couple kind of rapid questions, just to kind of frame some experience from each of you. And I'll go back to you, Ashley, just ask you if you don't mind just telling us a little bit about the early stages of your history, how you chose PR, how you found your way into your first job, and kind of any observations you have. And if you want to touch on things like your own personal mission or purpose, that's great, but we can come back to it later. So I'll turn it over to you, Ashley.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm really happy to be here and thrilled to be chatting with this amazing group of people about our favorite topic, public relations. I come from the Midwest in the United States originally, and growing up, I knew I wanted to end up in New York City. That was always my goal. I would go, traveling there as a kid, and just knew that was the end goal for me. I actually entered college as a pre-law major, and ended up meeting a really great professor in the journalism school at my university, who ended up persuading me that public relations was really more the area that I should be focused on. And I'm really thankful for that conversation, and extremely thankful for her academic guidance, which actually helped get me over to the East Coast for my first job. I was really taken with Ketchum and with the public relations agency overall. The idea that, I could work on a range of different clients and really cool brands and create really interesting impact was super exciting for me. I knew I wanted to be working in a really creative field in terms of PR. And so I actually started as an intern at Ketchum on the pharmaceutical side of things, and knew quickly that there was a role open for an entry-level position, more on the consumer healthcare side of things. So working for clients like Clorox and Crystal Light, Kellogg's Frosted Flakes, really fun brands of that nature. And I really loved the creative opportunity there. And so that was really sort of my transition into the agency world. I will say that I didn't know anyone at Ketchum at the time that I applied. And so I was sort of a really lucky recipient of a person in HR who noticed my resume and reached out. And I was told after being hired that it was between myself and a candidate that had went to Harvard, and someone who basically had the same resume as me, but went to a much more prestigious school. And for me, I think what really aided me in that process, apparently, is that I had the personality that they wanted to work with. I was authentic in the interview. I spoke about, myself. I, didn't try to be someone that I wasn't. And luckily for me, that actually resonated.
Sorry, I was on mute. I was saying go Cyclones. And thank you for not mentioning the football game this weekend. We usually have a bet between our two alma maters. I was glad that you either forgot or chose not to to bring it up. I just want to give Patty and Sean a chance to answer first. But just what was on your resume? Can I just ask, what made your resume stand out, do you think, from Mr. Harvard or Miss Harvard?
Yeah, something particularly that they mentioned is that I had studied abroad. And so they were really interested in learning. I took a lot of marketing and communications classes when I studied abroad. And they thought that was really interesting, particularly for the clients they had at Ketchum that really they had under a global portfolio. And so the interest there, I also think I did a ton of volunteering. I was a part of a lot of executive committees in college, which I think does give you a little bit more of that leadership skill foundation as you're going into an agency. And I think it was also just the passion and the drive. I had made it clear to them that I was someone who wanted to show up every day. And still to this day, I think that's something that aids us all as PR professionals, is having a team of people that know you're going to show up every day and you're going to be all in and make sure that, you know, everyone's sort of driving toward the same goal.
Yeah, exactly. 90% is just showing up, right? And having that, you know, that commitment that you can demonstrate on your resume is great. So Patty, let's go to you. How did you get started? How did you break in? What were your kind of your first steps in the agency world or the PR world?
Sure. So I'll start off by saying I'm from Moline, Illinois, which is where John Deere tractors are from. So I'm Midwestern, which at times means that I've been underestimated at different points in my career, which might seem silly to some, but people just have different expectations for people being from the Midwest, maybe not being that sophisticated. So I went to journalism school, similar background as Ashley, was very involved in leadership opportunities and in the university. And then I went on to go to grad school, and I really wanted to work at an embassy. And that was my plan. I wanted to be, you know, I worked for the State Department, and I graduated in 2011 with that degree. And it was not the time to be applying for jobs. If anyone is remembering that time, the United States government shut down for over a month. So not the time to go for a government position. And I think it's good that I, you know, wasn't working for the government the last 4 years or so, but so that ended up working out well, but I kind of was at a loss of what to do next. And I think when a lot of people talk about their bios, they talk about the high points. For me, some of the low points of like where I had to pivot and turn have been the most defining. So, you know, I had to look, I probably applied for like 50 different jobs. I obviously didn't have my resume as fine-tuned as Ashley's, but I figured it out. And I found a position at a small agency doing CSR and sustainability in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And again, not the most exciting stuff, but I handled big acquisitions and I built a really good resume for myself. And over time, eventually I started working with a recruiter from Ketchum who had noticed all the interesting work I was doing with agriculture and food companies. And Ketchum, you know, brought me in, was very interested in my background and moved me to Chicago. And I've been living here ever since. And as David mentioned before, Ketchum is a great place to work. And a lot of the big agencies are, especially at the beginning of your career, because you have the opportunity to dip your foot in so many different things. But one thing that Ketchum had was the Young Can Lions competition, which David alluded to earlier. And the second I heard about it, I had to go. You know, I needed to compete. And so the first year I was there, I actually competed and was a semifinalist and lost, and it broke my heart. And so that's another moment that I was kind of like, okay, I'm going to buckle down, but I made myself take a break. I didn't let myself think about it for 6 months. I was like, I can't, you know, obsess over some weird competition for a year. I need to do well at my work. So, but then when the competition came around again, we won, and it was a really great experience. And that's actually how I met everyone at Deloitte that brought me in, is they were doing a documentary following around the young lions for Wired magazine, and they, you know, included me in that. So I like to joke that Deloitte has hours and hours of hiring footage. You know, they didn't even need me to apply because they already knew me so well. But I think it just goes to show that a non-traditional resume and a lot of those experiences, even if maybe they're tough, they can really end up resonating into something greater.
Yeah, I love that, and I did not know that about Deloitte, and I didn't know they were the ones behind the documentary. Can you just, for people who aren't familiar with the competition, just sort of explain what the situation is? I think it kind of adds a little more respect for what you were able to do.
Sure, and I think this is great for this audience because it is a global competition. So if you're at an agency now, and I still have the timeline memorized, around March, they'll put out a call for people to enter a competition. Usually it's in pairs. So I had a great partner that I worked with. I can't take all the credit, but they put out a brief for a nonprofit that you come up with a strategic plan to how you can raise, you know, their visibility in the press and also their fundraising. And then you submit it. It needs to be under 10 slides. And the people that compete are incredibly creative, and they have certain goals and assets you need to use. So you definitely have some restraints as you're moving forward. And then if you are selected in the United States, you'll go to New York, you'll present to several of our like C-suite leaders from different agencies across the country. And there'll usually be about 5 teams presenting, and they'll pick one. And then you go to Cannes during the Cannes Festival of Creativity, and you compete on a global basis. So I was a US semifinalist, and then I won for the United States in, I think, 2017, but I don't like to talk about years, so.
But a huge amount of pressure. And I had no idea it was going to be that intense. I have to say that for those that don't know, the PRCA and the global group to which the PRCA belongs, which is called ICCO, created that in partnership with the organizers of the Cannes Lions Festival. And if you're not familiar with that festival, it is the largest gathering, not just of PR people. Actually, we're a small little subset of advertising, ad tech, media buyers, creatives of every kind. Production companies all come to this little gorgeous little town in the south of France to talk about everything related to communications, marketing, and production and creativity. So you were probably among the youngest there, and probably under the most pressure. And I apologize for being one of the people who created that moment, that competition for you. I didn't know it was going to be like boot camp, but congratulations. And, I just want to say too, your early experience resonates with me too. I think we tend to look back on our stories and find our moments of heroism, because we always put ourselves as the heroes of our own fairy tales. But I think it's those moments where we either got rejected, or we had to take a path different than we thought, or we had to pivot, as you say. Those can be just as formative, or even more formative. And just knowing that, I think for people to see what you've been able to achieve, knowing that it wasn't exactly as you started off, I think that's very encouraging for people. So thanks for that. Sean, how about you? I know a little bit of your early day stories. I think we talked about it in the pub, but nobody else has heard it on this call. So lay it on us.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thanks for allowing me to be part of this panel. I think my start really goes back to being a mediocre baseball player. Believe it or not, I think some more highly regarded athletes would be recruited by a college, whereas for someone as average as myself at the sport, I was just sending my tape everywhere. I was desperate to play college baseball. It's all I wanted to do. And I finally got a college to accept me and put me on their team, from reaching out and reaching out and reaching out and reaching out. And that actually translated into the PR gig as well. Once I was at school, a mentor of mine, she had actually worked for a number of different agencies. She worked for Edelman, she worked for Ketchum, she worked for Weber for a bit. And she opened my eyes to what public relations was and what a PR agency could be. I initially thought, oh, if I want to work in marketing, I just want to make a Super Bowl commercial. And then that quickly figured out reality and figured out I actually loved communications a bit more. So similar to my mediocre baseball days, I didn't win a Young Cannes Lion. I wasn't highly recruited. I was a pest. And so I looked up all the agencies. I realized that Ketchum seemed like one of the best, and I loved Ketchum. And so I did this incredibly ridiculous thing, which was to find out who the CEO of Ketchum was. It was Barry Rafferty at the time. And I emailed Barry Rafferty a personal email every semester starting sophomore year. Dear Mrs. Rafferty, I think I could be an asset to Ketchum. And eventually I broke her spirit, and she emailed me senior year and said, okay, Sean, you can be an intern. And so maybe thank goodness I wasn't a better athlete, but I think selling myself and pursuing something and being extremely persistent eventually got my foot in the door. And so I was an intern at Ketchum many years ago. Like Patty, I guess I won't talk about years. And so I have been there ever since. I had one small break, as David mentioned, where I left the agency world, went in-house to Netflix, and quickly I turned around and found the warm cocoon that was Ketchum again. And so that is where I am now, and it feels like it's been home forever.
Thanks for that. I think you had the North Carolina connection too, or Barry was from Georgia originally, right? But I'm sure you had a couple of appealing emails that tugged at our heartstrings. So, but persistence paid off, right? So
persistence paid off. Barry's daughter actually went to Elon as well. So I think we had some like back channeling recruiting for colleges as well. So there's definitely a Ketchum East Coast college ring happening right now.
Yeah. I'd forgotten about that. I just and I really did not mean to turn this into like a 1 hour celebration of Ketchum. We just all happen to have some common roots there, and maybe in a moment Ashley can also say some nice things about Weber. But I just want to make a point that Patty made. I think that, or take it in a slightly different direction. I think big agencies can be a great way to start your career. And I assume that a lot of people on the call are thinking about where and how to start their career. I assume other people are a little bit further in their careers, and maybe wondering what you do after you started at a big agency. So we can come to that in a moment. But I also started at a small, well, I didn't start, but I found my way into agency life in a small agency. And I just want to say that that can be a really, really great way to learn how the entire agency works, you know, from invoicing to finding new business to managing teams to cleaning up after the holiday party. A small agency is a great way to start your career too. And I just want to say that for anybody who's working for a small agency, and wondering, had they made a mistake? You haven't. You're just learning a different set of skills. And before we move on, I did see one question in the chat, and I think it's maybe for you, Patty. Just somebody Simon has an interest in working in embassies and wants to know kind of what sort of skills you think diplomatic staff, or look for at an entry level. I don't know if that's something you know about, from that experience. I can offer a few guesses, but I thought I'd throw that one to you first.
Sure. There's actually a book about working for the State Department that was very helpful. It's essentially a manual to the selection process that existed when I went through, and I'm sure there's an updated version. So I'd encourage you to find that. But they really look for people who can be diplomatic, you'll be tested, in a group with how you can work with other people. They look for how you can quickly assess situations, to have critical thinking skills. I remember during one of my interviews, they asked me what I would do if there was an attack on an embassy, what would my thought process be? And they, of course, love people who have interesting and dynamic backgrounds. So, if you know a different language, that's always good. You don't necessarily need to have the same resume. You don't need to have gone to Harvard and know Chinese and be a concert pianist. There was someone who was interviewing the same day as myself that had that background. They look for people who can, who have a variety of interests, but language is a really good area to strengthen yourself if you want to go for something like that.
I think, Simon, I couldn't know if you're Canadian or if you're British and living in Canada, but I know that the Foreign and Commonwealth Office in the UK and the Canadian Foreign Service has a similar manual and guide. So there are some published materials for that. But I think what your point is encouraging, that you don't have to, essentially be a spy to get hired. There are other ways in there. I want to go. There's a couple questions that are building up, but I think you might answer them in this next set of questions, or a question. Just you've all at least partly moved out of the agency world. Sean came back, but you went into an in-house role, and I think that the differences are surprising maybe to people, at least when you first move into it, but maybe not. I went the other way. I was in-house before I went agency side, and that was literally a million years ago. So I'll defer to more recent experience. But actually, you did it first. So maybe just a little bit about kind of your experience transitioning from agencies to in-house roles, and what you thought was interesting or surprising.
Yeah, I transitioned, and first of all, again, loved working at Ketchum. I did also then go to Weber Shandwick, so we'll mention another agency, and really enjoyed my time there. What was really lucky, when we think about a lucky break, for me was transitioning in-house, actually at the recommendation of a client of mine at the time, someone that she had worked for as a head of comms, was working at AOL at the time. This was around 2013. And this client and I had a really great relationship. I'd worked with her for a couple years. We're very similar people, very similar working styles. And she had basically said to me, hey, I think, I benefited a lot from working for this person, and I think you could too. And so she actually recommended me to the job, and that was really what kickstarted me taking the first step in-house. I was at AOL, which was then bought by Verizon, which was then merged with Yahoo. So I was there for about 6.5 years. And, I think later, if we ever talk about lessons learned, tips of the trade, things that we've learned over the years, acquisitions, integrations, consistent change, I think is something we're seeing across the industry overall, but was a really interesting time for me to be there. And then since then, I've moved over to Spotify. I've been here for about 1.5 years. So I think overall, the biggest change for me is really, and it sounds so basic, but you're going from being in a room full of PR people all day long to going into a room where you are the only PR person. And so you're going into these meetings, you're having conversations throughout the day with people who have very different focus areas and disciplines than what you've studied. And so you're the person that knows everything about comms, understanding that no one else at the table knows anything that you're talking about. And so there's sort of a constant education process that happens when you're in-house. One of the best pieces of advice I got very early on at AOL by an amazing woman named Susan Lyon is she really encouraged me to set up meetings cross-functionally with every type of discipline at the organization. So sit with one of the software engineers today, tomorrow sit with a product marketing lead, tomorrow sit with, X discipline, and really understand and learn what they do, what's a win for them, what does success mean, what are their hurdles and barriers, and really sort of teach everyone how comms plays into their day-to-day or can be useful to them in the future. And that foundation is something that I've set into place with any new brand that I work on, any new project. It's so vital to really build those relationships. And that has really been a key to success for me. And today, I think after working in-house now for about 8.5, 9 years, that is my favorite part of the job is working cross-functionally with all of these brilliant minds who have very different focus areas and very different goals than me, and coming up with a collective win-in strategy. So I think that's something that still really excites me every day.
Yeah, I can imagine that. And they really respect you for what you know, right? So they've got their thing that they know, and it's novel to you, and the level of expertise that you wouldn't be expected to know. But I'm guessing they treat you with the same kind of respect and same sort of deference to your advice. And I think that probably is rewarding. For me, it was the opposite. I was at the American Diabetes Association. I was about the only communications person there. And I was constantly defending our budget and our processes and why not everything was worth a press conference. And then we hired Hill & Knowlton, I'll mention a third agency. And I just fell in love with the idea that there was a whole group of people that did nothing but communications and PR, and I wouldn't have to explain it all the times. But I see that I think it kind of makes the same point that you can kind of get benefits from both. Just before we move on, just Spotify. So that's a hot, sexy brand. Does that make a difference? Does the appeal of the brand you work for, does that change your day-to-day life, or does it come down to just being same kind of work, just different labels?
Yeah, I think for me, again, having been at my previous organization for almost 7 years, there was a real, I think, pivot for me and taking a step back for a bit and figuring out what I wanted to do next, where I wanted to work. And so for me, I had sort of made a short list, as PR people do, a short list of the companies that I was really interested in, really dug into their purpose, tying this back a little bit to your book, the type of work that they were doing, how they were sort of taking comms to the next level every day. It was really interesting to me. And if I can totally be honest, this was another case of I applied for the job, I didn't have a connection, and my background seemed to resonate with them. But I think working for a company that I believe in the mission, I'm excited about the work, their storytelling in different ways, comms is really respected internally. These are all things that matter so much on the day-to-day. And I think also working with a team of people that you really love. But I agree, I've been a big fan of Spotify for a long time. I've been a long-time user. And this year I'm actually have the opportunity to work on our Wrapped campaign for anyone who is a Spotify user and is aware of our big campaign throughout the year. So I'm really proud to be able to sort of lead the charge on something that I've been a fan of for quite a while.
Yeah, you should be. And you also, you're being modest, but you have been very resilient, especially throughout your AOL to Yahoo years. And I think usually you and I would manage to have a face-to-face like once a year is pretty much how it, and every time I can see you say, well, here's an update. We just got bought. My job is either in serious jeopardy or it's a great opportunity for me. And I really admire the way you would, until you decided you had something bigger and better to go to at Spotify, you would stick it out. And those were nervous periods for you, I know, because you couldn't control your own destiny. When you get acquired or you get merged, you lose a lot of control, and a lot of your equity, starts to fade away. So I was always impressed with your ability to recognize the risk, see it through, and then know when it was time to move up.
Well, thank you for that. And I feel like it's really a testament to, people talk about mentors a lot, and I know we're friends, but I do consider you a mentor over the years as well. And you've given me some really great advice. Something that I think when we think about change in the industry, we're seeing that every day. The way that the world has changed so much in the last 2 years. I think we all in this career deal with change on a day-to-day basis. And something that when we had first been acquired at AOL by Verizon, another piece of advice that was given to me was to read the book. It's called Mindset. It's by Carol Dweck, I believe. And it really focuses on controlling or being mindful of your mindset on a day-to-day. It's the idea that, you know, a curveball is thrown at you and being conscious of how you're reacting to it. Are you receiving it? Are you embracing it? Are you learning from it? Or are you sort of stepping back and saying, ooh, I don't like this, I feel uncomfortable. And so keeping that mindset has been incredibly valuable to me. And I will also plug, recently this year, I read Adam Grant's Think Again, another fantastic book for anyone who hasn't read it yet, but that's something that our team at Spotify has been reading and spending some time on. And I think it's that, again, the idea that we're able to be comfortable, not as focused about getting it right or being right, but getting it right. So looking at a problem or even a project that you've executed and being able to rethink the process and not being afraid to sort of avoid the change.
Well, I'm going to add both those books to my reading list. The first one, the curveball analogy. So I've been trying to read a lot about Stoic philosophy, and the shortest version of that is you cannot control anything outside of your own head. So you can't control the ball, how fast it's coming, or what direction, or whether it's curved, but you can control your reaction to the ball. And that's been very edifying for me during the pandemic and other issues, is to think about my own mindset rather than the outside world. So I want to go maybe to Sean. Speaking of leaving the agency world, going to sexy brands like Netflix, there's a specific question about the culture of Netflix. And you and I talked about that. I think that's something that attracted you and that you still draw from to this day. So it was a positive experience for you. Even though you chose to move on and go back to agency life. And maybe talk to us a little bit about that and kind of what you got out of that experience, and again, some of the differences that you've learned some lessons about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think at this point, the Netflix culture is pretty well known. Their culture deck is public and is shared around. I think it's been evolved quite a bit. But really, I think it can all boil down to this concept of radical transparency. They kind of live and die on the fact that all information is public, at least internally at the company, that people are respectful to each other, but also extremely direct. That is not a hierarchical environment, that you can give feedback up, down, sideways. And I actually really, really thrived in that environment and really enjoyed it. I would have loved to have been at Netflix for a very long time, if I was completely honest. I was kind of faking it in the entertainment space, whereas I am true kind of sports at my core, and that was the reason for going back. But their culture, I think, was something that I tried to bring to my teams now. This is not exactly great naming and framing, but on my team right now, we just call it the adult rule. We treat each other like adults. Like, I don't care if you work 9 to 5. I don't care if you have a doctor's appointment. Like, we kind of trust each other in the fact that we are doing the best for the business and the best for each other as well. I mean, even looking in the chat right now, Arpana asked a question about what does it mean to be authentic in the interview process. I think it actually relates to this. I think being authentic in the interview process is recognizing that it is a two-way relationship, that you are not just saying the things that you think the recruiter or the interviewer wants to hear. You are saying things that are true to yourself and the things that you look for to make sure that if you are hired at that agency or at that company, that you are able to be your authentic self, that you aren't putting on some sort of facade. Because while most people think the win would be getting the job, I think the greater win is making sure that you recognize if you are a match or not. Because I think the worst case scenario may be getting a job and then getting there and realizing that it's not the right culture for you. So I loved my time at Netflix because I think it taught me about the culture that I do like and I do thrive in. It ultimately wasn't the right job, but I was able to steal some of those cultural aspects and bring them back to Ketchum. And so I think it's been a bit of a win-win. So being authentic is knowing the culture that you want to be in. And as you're going into that interview process, being very clear of what you're looking for.
If I can pop in with one comment to sort of feed off what Sean said, just again, in the last 2 years, I've gone through the interview process again. Something that really helped me, not only having a few friends review your resume and sort of have someone from the outside of PR sort of review all of your talking points about your PR career is really helpful. But there's also a lot of really great podcasts out there. And I'm not just plugging this because of Spotify, but there are a lot of really great podcasts. I think what's really important, or what was for me, after having a few years of experience, you've worked on a lot of different things. You've done a lot in your career. How do you really frame that into a story? What, getting really solid on your story, what you want the interviewers to hear about you is so important, because there can be so many different tangents that you can go on in the interview process. And listening to these podcasts really helped me to understand and sort of take a step back and frame my story. And so I think that in itself makes the interview process a little bit more approachable and allows you to really be your authentic self.
I think that's great. That's great advice. And Sean, I was just going to say, I think you should call that the Sean Flynn rule. I'll help you frame that a little bit differently for the future. but I like
Perfect.
that. How novel, treating each other like adults. But so Patty, you and I were literally kind of discussing some of this yesterday, just in terms of authenticity and how you come across as your true self. And you mentioned it earlier in your comments about making sure that at least part of your story reflects some challenges or some disappointments in a way, because I think that's human, and I think that makes you more relatable, and I think it tells a fuller story. Now, it doesn't have to be a tale of woe and heartbreak, but I think that letting people know that you've had some setbacks or disappointments is a good part of the storytelling process. But so you left the agency world and you went to Deloitte, and as you know, I think we've discussed before too, the agency world is pretty paranoid about management consultancies, about how smart they are and how structured they are and how they're going to eat us up and how take us over and push us out of the way with our clients. Yet you're advising, one of the world's most successful, largest management consultancies on communications. So I'm just wondering what you found to be true or not true about that, and how if there is a gap, how you've bridged it.
That is such a great question. I would say that the agencies are right to be a little threatened at times by companies like Deloitte, because they have, and our competitors have a lot of money to invest in spaces that they're interested in. But the agencies are also agile and really smart, and Deloitte's kind of like a dinosaur. So, we're only as smart as the people we have in it. And we work with a lot of agencies too. And they are an essential part of our work. I don't think the consulting companies will ever replace agencies. And I don't think agencies want to get into some of the space we do, because it's very unsexy a lot of the time. But there's a lot we can learn from each other. One of the most interesting projects I've been working on this last year is really talking about, communications of the future and what we're going to all be working on in 2025. So how will we be reporting data? What will our analytics look like? What kind of operating structure do we need? Do we all need to be on Clubhouse? That's what everyone was asking me in March. Now, I don't know if everyone would say that now that we're not all stuck at home. Yeah, Sean, maybe we'll be in the metaverse or in the alphabet verse, but it's interesting how these things are evolving. So I think agencies are really great at evolving and learning things really quickly. And that's what I see on this panel. But I think the great thing that consulting firms offer is they do have a lot of process and operations and really smart people. On any given day, I don't ever have to worry about being the smartest person in the room. I'm always a smart person in the room. I feel like my peers are very respectful and are interested in hearing what I have to say, because there aren't that many voices like mine in the company. But I do think, that the consulting companies need agencies, and we have a lot we can learn from each other.
Yeah, totally agree. Well, how do you find it from so you're the agency person there. I mean, how do they treat you? I mean, do you have your, like we were talking with Ashley, do you have your sphere of knowledge and influence that gets plugged in?
So it very much depends on the person. And I think having the right personality helps you be more successful in any role. But something somebody told me recently was that I'm very good at saying no, and here's why. And I'm good at outlining the reasons why in a way that makes sense to someone who might be very focused on the business or bottom line. So I loved when you said earlier about in your past life, how you used to have to say no more press conferences on this issue, because these last couple of years, I've been retraining people to say, maybe we don't need a press release on this, or we can only do it if we have a really amazing client or some data or some research, kind of reframing. And it's personality. It's like how you break things down, but it's also being patient, so maybe you work with somebody one time and then they come back in 6 months and they kind of remember what you did. And it's a lot of education. And I think Sean and Ashley have both mentioned that at different points in this. It's like teaching those around you. Like mentorship can be 360. You can learn from people under you. You can teach people that are above you. And so much of that is how you're able to express your ideas and like asking the right questions and saying like, yes, but, or no, and, or, like, let's think about it. Maybe like, I hate to push things off, but sometimes you have to say like, let's do a little bit more like thinking on this. Like maybe there's someone else you need to tap or some research you need to look at. So I think I kind of lost where I was going with the question, to be honest with you.
No, it's good. No, it did answer the question too. And I know you have some time directly with the CEO, and I think that your style and your attitude, your no, but here's why is exactly the right answer for that. There was a question further back in the chat, and I was trying to scroll back to find it. I think it was from Joe. We've all mentioned different influences we've had, sometimes from within the industry and sometimes from without. And I think the question was, how do we make a career, whether it's in-house or in agencies, more attractive, possibly to university students, but possibly people coming without the benefit of university education, coming from other backgrounds. How do we basically, offer better PR for PR? And I would just wonder if anybody on the panel has kind of a quick thought on that, or something you think we could either do more of or start doing if we're not doing it now.
Yeah, I mean, I made kind of a joking quip about I wanted to make Super Bowl ads when I was in college, and I think that was because that's kind of what I thought marketing was. That's what I thought communication was. And it's amazing the number of students that I speak to that even if they're not necessarily looking for a job at Ketchum, they're just looking for general advice. I'll ask them, well, what do you want to do? And they'll say things like, I want to make a Super Bowl ad, or I would love to work with athletes, or I want to work for Nike, or I want to work for Spotify. And I think there is an opportunity to, yes, go for those goals. If that's what you want to do, absolutely. But I'd encourage any students or anyone getting in the industry to not be so focused on a specific brand, but think about what they love to do. And as PR people, I think we can do a better job of showing the diversity of ways in. I didn't even know what a PR agency was until I got into college. And so now being able to explain, there's agencies, there's in-house, there's working for teams and leagues and whatever else. And there's just a million ways to get your foot in the door, rather than being so singularly focused on, I want to work on X brand, I think is really, really important. Because I, like all of us, as you can see, we've started one place, and then your career grows as you learn and figure out what you want to do. Some of us boomerang back, others of us continue to flourish and go elsewhere. So I wouldn't be too caught up on your first thing being your only thing, and think about all the different ways that you can kind of get into the industry. The last thing I'll say, and then I'll stop talking, it's also by no means a prerequisite to have a PR or communications degree. I think overwhelmingly people we're recruiting right now, if you have that experience, excellent, that's great. But you don't have to have that degree. You don't have to have the standard internship. I think it's being extremely proactive, extremely excited. Ashley said earlier, just showing up. And I know that seems like a very simple statement, but having an excitement and a passion about what you want to do, I think is more important than any degree you have on paper, or eventually even whatever brand you work for.
It's a great answer. Ashley or Patty, anything to add to that?
Ashley, I'll let you go ahead, since we both unmuted at the same time.
Well, I think there's a real opportunity right now too with, again, the state of the world. And I think we've seen, unfortunately, a lot of newsrooms consolidating. And I think even the way in which the younger generations are consuming news and understanding news via platforms like TikTok and other social media channels, the way in which storytelling is happening is also changing. And I think there's a real opportunity for especially the younger generations to come in and help guide the way on what the future of public relations and how it evolves looks like. I know something that's really interesting for us at Spotify is telling our own story is something that's really important to us. Again, as newsrooms consolidate, et cetera, we use our own channels called Spotify for the Record, for anyone that might be familiar with that, as our newsroom and blog. But last year really had a conversation around being authentic to our own brand. Spotify is audio first with music and podcasts. And so as a comms team, we actually started our own podcast. So we're sort of telling our story in our own way that's authentic to Spotify. And so opportunities like that, even growing, social channels for the comms team and for comms news is really interesting too. And again, these are areas where we're really welcoming input from people who may not have a comms background. Maybe they have a producing background or whatever that looks like. And so I think the way forward is going to really evolve for comms, and there's a real opportunity for those who may be outside of comms to get into it.
I love both those perspectives, and especially the point that, you can start somewhere. You could start as a producer and you can get into comms. You can start in an agency and you can move in-house. I think anyone on this panel would say that maybe they've been reinventing themselves every 2 to 3 years. I think sometimes we think of ourselves as this stagnant bio on a PowerPoint slide somewhere, or maybe that's just the consulting firms, but we're a lot more than that. We're constantly changing, and the expectations of what you'll be doing in a couple of years are changing. What we're all working on now is fine. And it's fine to think, I like doing this today, but maybe I don't want to do this in 3 years, and to be actively working towards doing something else. You're never stuck in a role. I mean, like, to go back to what I said about my first role, I was working with pigs for a while, a big pork company. I remember crying after one of my first days at work because I had just gotten this graduate degree and spent a bunch of money, and I was like, what the heck? But I learned a lot in that. And then I've been reinventing myself every day. And I think, everyone's probably cracking up a little bit thinking about working with pigs, but I think it makes you more interesting when you have moved around. Like Ashley went through all these acquisitions, and Sean went to Netflix and found that it wasn't maybe the right fit, but he learned a lot. And that's really what building a career is all about, is being able to think like, just, what's the iteration that you're in today? And then what do you maybe want to do next? And today in the world, there's more flexibility than ever before.
I was laughing.
Patty,
no, go ahead.
I was just going to say one thing I'll add, though. I don't necessarily think, and this is to sound like I'm completely drinking the Kool-Aid. The reason why I love communications and PR, though, I don't think you have to move around to rediscover and change. I mean, when my career started, it was picking up the phone and pitching reporters and putting out that press release. And I think a fax machine maybe existed in our office. Whereas nowadays, my job is primarily content strategy and figuring out how we are going to reach people, directly in their own channels. And so I think our own industry is evolving so much and changing daily. And especially if you're in an agency, it changes client to client. That diversity of what you do can happen just from the evolution of the career that we're in without necessarily requiring jumping around.
That's a great point, Sean. And I think any of the companies that we're at also are respecting that the industry is evolving and that there are new positions all the time. It's not just the industry, it's the world that's changing.
I was just going to say, I laughed when you talked about working with pigs, because I've worked with a few too. They were just of the human variety, but I'll save that for a different time and a different place. My only addition, I love each of those views on the question. The only thing I would say, and this is for everybody on the call, I think the way we make this business, this community more attractive, making ourselves available and telling our stories and our experiences, much like these three have generously done. But I would ask everybody to do that. Speak to your old schools, speak to almost anybody who's interested in it and who's thinking about what's coming next. Make yourself available. Ashley had mentioned mentors. Make mentors of yourselves. I think you have so much to offer, and you'll be really surprised at how helpful it is to you to help someone else better understand yourself, if that makes sense. So you think you're giving somebody some advice, but actually you're kind of giving yourself some advice, and it's helpful to hear it come out of your own mouth. I speak to a lot of university journalism, PR, marketing, advertising classes. I've started saying I will do that, but I need to also speak to a class in the business school. I think a lot of MBAs come out without really any understanding at all about our function, whether it's in corporate reputation or on marketing communications. And so I've kind of made that a prerequisite. I'll talk to PR students all day long, but I do need to talk to at least one MBA class. And they ask great questions, and they're further ahead on a lot of things than I think we would probably give them credit for. And I think there's plenty of ways for us to have better, more structured partnerships with academic universities and academic programs, and kind of bring those two parts of the community together. We're down to about 9 minutes. I'm going to ask each of you a quick question, and I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this, but I'll see who looks the most pained by it and go there first. But I mean this seriously. I would really like to know kind of where you see yourself, if not next, but over time. When will you feel like you've made it? And I'm asking this just to get a sense of your trajectory and your ambitions, but also, so we know how to help you. Like, we kind of know what you're aiming for. So without asking you in a wishy-washy way, what's your purpose? It's almost like, how will you know that you've reached, at least as far as you know at the time, what your dream job is, what your dream role is. And you can't say it right now, because I know you've each got more things in store for you, and you're capable of even better things than you're doing now. And Patty, you're big on my screen right now, so I'm going to go with you first. Sorry.
Wow. Well, I still feel like I'm pretty young in my career, so I don't have an end destination in sight at the moment. I'm stuck on, re-evolving every 2 to 3 years, but I won't go back into that spiel. I'll tell you a book. I have a novel idea that is about someone working in PR, and I really want to sit down and get better at putting pen to paper. And I'll know that I am at least a disciplined career professional when I'm setting aside time to do that every day. Because, and this is some free advice on the call, don't ever give all of yourself to work. Make sure that you're building out some stuff for yourself, and that everything you do isn't under like a corporate masthead. So that's when I have kind of established a presence doing something like that, that's when I'll feel like I've really made it.
Let's pitch your book as a podcast series to Spotify. I think we had the person to help with that.
I don't know if I have a voice for radio, but maybe Ashley could find me a coach.
Ashley, how will you know when you've made it?
How will I know when I've made it? I really like your point about work-life balance and achieving those personal goals. For me, as David knows, I've always been really, I've always admired his international travel and focus from a work perspective. And I'd love to bring that more into the fold with what I do. Also, I think coming from Verizon, AOL, Yahoo into Spotify, I really love the connection of consumer PR and tech. And I think where what the future holds for platforms, and as like this whole universe changes with, again, like the TikToks, et cetera, of it all, I think I'm really interested to see like where the industry goes, and with the emergence of Gen Z and Gen Alpha and their behaviors, I think I'm really interested to see sort of the connection of influencer work with comms and tech. So it's a pretty vague answer, but that's kind of where my head's at. But I think I will have made it when I've traveled the world.
I like that. And I think it's a balanced answer. And I know you, and it's part of yourself, but it's part of your ambition, and it's part of your desire to get some good Instagram photos around the world. So I see all those things coming together for you. Sean, how will you know?
I think this means we have to meet somewhere other than Austin and New York, by the way,
yeah,
somewhere else in the world.
That's fine. There are other places. Although I just saw the last time I was with Sean, we were in Austin, Texas. That's another theme for me. But Sean, how will you know when you've made it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think Patty probably had the quote of the panel with "Don't ever give all of yourself for work," and I know that seems like a contradiction to how you know if you'll made it. For me, I would say throughout my 20s, I defined myself by my job, and I think I've certainly not made it yet, but I'm getting closer to making it, in realizing I can be extremely proud of the work I do, and I find a lot of value in PR and communications, but it doesn't necessarily define me as a person. And so kind of figuring out who I am as an individual while still being completely committed to the work that I do and supporting my teams. I'm evolving for sure, but I think I'm getting closer to where I want to be, in the sense that, especially when you're young in PR, I do think it's competitive. And I think you do need to thrive a little bit off some ego. Getting that first press hit feels good. Seeing something go, God, I'm going to say the word viral, feels really, really good. And that used to be a shot of adrenaline for me. But I think as my career has grown, I've actually seen a lot of value and a lot more appreciation for growing teams. And just like David, you served as a mentor to me, and I've had a lot of brilliant people guide my career. I'm feeling really good about helping my junior teams grow, and seeing them get press hits and seeing them help clients, and really serving more that manager mentor role is something that I have loved. And it's been more recent in my career and something that I hope continues to grow. And I suppose I've made it when I'm hosting a panel like this and I'm sitting in DG's chair.
I actually have a standing desk, but that you'll know you've made it when you have a standing desk. Well, those are all great answers. I think you've all made it. I was joking, but I do see bright futures for all of you, and I hope you'll keep us posted on your steps toward them. And I'm so glad to see each of you, and I know you are in your own spheres, serving as mentors yourself, and not just to those who work for you, but those around you. You've all taught me things, and I'm a lot older than all of you, and I'm always grateful for you kind of putting me on the right path when I've misunderstood something. And I would just encourage everybody on the call to see themselves as mentors and role models as well. I am supposed to mention to you that this session has been recorded and it will be available. I think Michael can either put that in the chat. And Michael, I've been trying to keep up with questions. Did I miss anything big in our last 3 minutes that you think we need to get to?
No, I think you nailed all the questions. I absolutely love this whole conversation because as someone who spent pretty much most of my 20s not knowing really what I was doing, I knew that I could write and I knew I was pretty creative, but I really knew nothing about the industry that I was in. It was all a little bit blind. But sort of recently, these sort of events definitely give a lot more clarity about sort of what I'm doing on a personal level as well. So thank you very much for everyone for giving their insight. It's been an awesome hour. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. I'll thank you, each of the panelists as well. I know I kind of leaned on you to do this, but I was really happy when you said yes, and I was really happy that we could find a time that worked for everybody. I hope you'll come back again for future shows. Michael, you and I have talked about some other ideas for other people, similar conversations we can have. So we'd love some feedback from the participants. If you think this is a good use of time, we could cover different periods of careers. We kind of focus on the beginning, but we could spend more time in the middle, and even towards the end of people's careers, how they continue to feel valued and offer things. So lots of room to talk, but thanks again. I'll draw us to a close unless there's anything else. But please stay in touch. I think everybody's put details in the chat, but I'd say stay connected with each other and encourage each other, and let's go out and change the world together.
Terrific.
Thanks everybody.
Thank you, David.
All right, bye guys.